So my name is Anne Klaas. I am the co-founder of the agency Machine, and we focus on fashion, sustainability, and technology. And I'm also one of the founding mothers, I can say, of the European Fashion Alliance, together with Scott, the director of the Fashion Council Germany. And I'm a true believer of collaboration across borders, especially to create impact and change, and to support creativity, of course. I'm proud to be here on stage with Dr. Christian Ehler. He is a member of the European Parliament already since 2004, and he is also a member of the advisory board of Fashion Council Germany. You are also a firm supporter of the creative fashion ecosystem through your engagement of the European Fashion Alliance, as well as the German fashion sector at large. The European creative fashion sector, largely driven by SMEs and independent designers, is undergoing major transformation. And we have sustainability regulations, digital innovation, global competition, and they present both opportunity but also challenges. And I know you've played a pivotal role in supporting the creative industry, so we would love to hear your vision for the future and also what kind of industry collaboration you believe is necessary. Because you've said before, fashion is about dreams and constant reinvention. And as the EU pursues climate goals, so how can policy support this creative identity while also supporting, of course, sustainability targets? So what balance should we strike between innovation and regulation?
I mean, first of all, the good news is politics takes you seriously. I mean, if you're honest, I mean, you hadn't been on the landscape, on the political landscape in the last decade. The other side of that is politics takes you seriously, which means that we are no longer talking about ambition plans. We had been applauding to things. We are talking now about implementation. Mm-hmm. And I think what works and what had been highly needed is that you're present in the political, but also in the broader societal discussion. And what we are doing is, in quite practical terms, I mean, in 26, I mean, most of people don't know, usually companies are no longer allowed to destroy their surplus. No longer. So if I sometimes ask small brands, have you any idea whether near to you or in your country or in Europe there's a way for you to recycle your stuff? I mean, they hardly know. Mm-hmm. So what we had been doing is, on the one hand, now reality or shit hits the fan. I mean, it's really changing the way you're going to do your business. But we had been saying, okay, we have a lot of very small companies here, and we give to some extent a waiver for sometimes for the transformation. But I mean, the big players, I mean, and if you go to the biggest one, LMVH, I mean, from next year on, literally has to rethink their complete business model. Mm-hmm. And what we are doing is a multitude of issues. I mean, first of all, we talked and listened to you guys. And I think that was not necessarily the case a few years ago. Secondly, I mean, we go to technology. The question is, how are you going to do that? What do you know about your apparel? Are you part of these innovations? How does innovation fit to your business model? So if you have a kind of thermo solution for that, does that work for your cotton or for your product? So it has a practical angle. It has a political angle. So when is it get mandatory for you? But I think it's going to change the business completely. And we might talk a little bit later on the digital tag. Absolutely. Which from my point of view, I mean, Amazon is staring at that. Not so much designers for the moment. And it's interesting to see what is your perception from the big ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, of course, also the creatives, many creatives, they want to comply with the sustainable practices, but they also face some barriers, limited resources, access to funding, maybe sometimes also a lack of technical knowledge. How can the EU policy maybe better recognize or address these challenges in a realistic and tailored way for the industry?
I mean, if you're honest, for a lot of these ambitions, we theoretically know technology solutions, but we don't have them. And more specifically, they are not adopted to the needs of the smaller companies. So, I mean, all the research ministers which had been negotiating with me when I was the rapporteur for that, we had been placing in the biggest civilian research program in the world, that's Horizon Europe right now, we had been placing 2 billion euros for the creative industry because we thought there will be a transformation, a change in technology, it will open up new markets, that we really need innovation and this really hard stuff of getting science together with businesses in order to accompany that transformation. But, the big but is, to what extent a small company can leverage to the extent that they participate in things like that. But all what you know, where you get your apparel from, what is your materials you're working on, is in a state of absolute transformation. I mean, the textile industry in Europe got €1 billion, €1 billion. This is big. About thinking what and how is the cotton world going to end? Yeah. And I mean, what means that for businesses? Pretty much saying, okay, in a perspective of 10 years, we're going to leave the cotton world. Potential, but on the other hand, we are throwing practically 500 years, or let's say 200 years of the cotton, let's say the cotton economy or the cotton fashion world simply overboard.
Absolutely. You also just touched upon it quite briefly, digital product passports. I'm also personally active at the Belgian University as an applied researcher on digital product passports. And I also truly believe that the ESPR regulation and digital product passports will deeply affect fashion production, but of course transparency, create new business opportunities, because it's a digital layer that will create also a bridge to your second and third consumer. And it also pushes circularity, of course. So Dr. Ehler, from your perspective, how do you think that these rules can support creativity, but of course also circular thinking in fashion?
I mean, when we started with that, it was a kind of consumer protection measure, pretty much saying, okay, you have to tell your consumer where your apparel comes from, what is your CO2 footprint, and so on and so on. And we thought, when we discussed with the sector and the European Fashion Council, that isn't it a little bit narrow-minded? I mean, how many 14-year-olds will be there at, I don't know, some kind of these fast fashion things, and then going to check with their handy about apparel and something like that. So first of all, it sounded boring. Secondly, we thought, okay, our consumers are going to take that? But it puts a lot of obligation on your shoulders, because you have to understand your supply chain, you have to spend money on that. It's not just you can claim something, you have to have empiric evidence and things like that. And then it clicked in when we thought, but this is going to revolutionize the way you guys could consume or would organize your B2C world. I mean, you're heavily depending more or less either on stationary shops or on platform economy. You hardly, I mean, you pay money actually to learn something from platforms about your consumer. I mean, your customers the information about them are sold to you, and sometimes even hidden, because e-commerce platforms not necessarily have an interest in that. Would it be if you have your QR code and this 14-year-old next to this door looks to pretty much saying, okay, let's check a little bit whether this is the complete disaster. But then all of a sudden, this is not a kind of teaching lesson in basic chemistry. It's you appearing, telling them something about your story, about what you think about sustainability, what you know, what is your vision. So, I mean, you get the chance, if you see the digital tech from a different angle, you get a chance to get in contact. You can ask them, are you interested in things like that? Then click here, I tell you more about that story. You can start storytelling. And believe me, the interesting thing when we originally started with that, it was a very regulatory proposal. I mean, this kind of, how would that look like? And then you have data storage obligations and a lot of shit, to be honest. But then we thought, okay, why is Amazon going so nervous about that? We had a lot of Amazon involvement all of a sudden in that, and they said, fuck, I mean, what does that mean if they can talk to their consumers, to their customers? I mean, do they need platforms again? If you can say, okay, you like that, would you like to learn more about the story, more about my product, more about what I'm going to do in autumn, more about I'm going to change my business, more about what I like in music, what is cross-selling. So in a way, I think we are at a time of, I mean, groundbreaking changes. And it might even change the platform economy by things like that. That's not the only way to do it, but it's an opener we have never seen before. And that's interesting. So I like that when Amazon gets nervous, you know. I'm thinking we're on a good path.
Yeah, absolutely. So give the power also to the brands and the consumers directly. I think it will also push digitization, which is of course one movement we see happening, or we want to see happening even more in the fashion sector. But if we are looking ahead towards, let's say, 2030, what is your vision for the European fashion ecosystem? What would success look like for you, and what would be necessary to get there?
What I think that is, we had been living in silos. I mean, you know that better than me. I'm over 60, slightly overweighted German, and I'm wearing a jacket where my daughter told me, get a new jacket, lose weight if you want to still go on in the German Fashion Council. But what I see is that the silos between, for example, functional clothing, fashion, that will all break down. I think we're going to see a revolution in textures. I mean, if you look to what is developed now with the military, I mean, of all the military, but it's interesting that they're working on fibers which are no longer exactly organic or anorganic, that you can already build fibers where you put electricity on and the fiber is getting bigger or smaller. This separation between winter clothing and summer clothing, interesting whether that is going to happen in future. So practically all what we would know and would somehow comfortable with, but would be also the limits of the sector, from my point of view, all these boundaries are going to fall. And we are in front of groundbreaking changes about consumers' perception of you, but also on your market. And I think that, I mean, for example, we're not talking just bullshit. I mean, the Commission goes for the first time about Shine. I learned that it's an e-commerce platform. I had to look it up, to be honest. I'm not so many times. But now we are going about Shine, because we say consumer protection, this pressure of buying things, fake sales, so all the instruments for fast fashion, we are going after now. And if you see the Commission, I mean, it might be an abstract institution to you, but we do things to Microsoft that we impose €2 billion fines. So it could be that if we are getting serious about that this fast fashion world is not what our society's consumers want to see. And so in a way, we are at the dawn of changes. But I do see also a potential even for smaller brands to cross borders and tear down limits, economic limits, but also limits in creativity in a way we might not have seen in 150 years of cotton world.
Absolutely. You also mentioned it early. The European Commission is also open for conversations, discussions, dialogue with the sector. So you have here, of course, a room full of the ecosystem at large, I would say. We have students, you have researchers, you have brands. If you have one message for them, what would that be to end our discussion?
My message is, I mean, tonight, exactly tonight, funnily, the public consultation on the digital tag had been ending. And it's interesting that we more and more had been implementing, before we really impose things, dialogue formats, time where we want to know what sectors are thinking, what individuals are thinking. Participate. I mean, in the past, I mean, it was a little bit like, are they taking us seriously? Do they know us? That's for free in politics, you know. Appreciation is relatively for free. You have to work for that, but appreciation is for free. That's easy for politics. What's now making things serious is that we understood that we can't just impose. We have to learn. We have to understand. We can't have the business model for the sector for the future. So what I'm saying is this kind of wonderful times of the intellectual and moral superiority of the victim is over. You're now part of the game. You're taking seriously, you're existing statistically. 5 years ago, the sector didn't exist statistically. Eurostat wouldn't know what actually the fashion and the design sector is. We didn't know the figures. There was no way to measure that. So now, as I said in the very beginning, welcome. Politics takes you seriously. That's the good news. And welcome to the tough message. Politics takes you seriously. And that means how is dialogue structured? What forms of organization you find? Do you want to participate in innovation models? Is the way to leverage very small companies to work together with the big chemical industry, with the big innovation drivers here? And that is a task to come. And the good or bad news is, yes, you might be an individual entrepreneur, but you're part of a big societal change. And the question is simply, are you participating or are you the object of change?
Absolutely. But the good news is that Metamorphosis is all about dialogues, about change. So I'm happy we could kickstart the dialogue here on stage, but of course also happy to continue these conversations off stage. Thank you, Dr. Ehler.
Thank you very much.